My goal this year was to cut down my time in work so that I have 50% of my time for free to do what I want. And that will be because I like what I do and I enjoy what I do. That will be a lot of work that will be filling that in those particular strategic areas. But yeah, it's been pushing me around this week, which has been, deep down we love it. We love the pressure, don't we? It's kind
How
of
do you
what
guys
we're in it for.
deal with pressure? Because I had this conversation with somebody yesterday who was telling me that they were going into a meeting. They've never been into like that type of meeting before. It was with as an employed person. They're going into a meeting with senior officials, directors, and it shouldn't have been them in the meeting, but they got chucked into it and wasn't confident they didn't have all the answers and was like very worked up and worried about the type of thing. So how do you guys deal with because we've all gone through some serious pressured situations where the outcome isn't very clear, and when you look at the worst case scenario, it's not a good scenario. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I thrive in those environments. If I'm doing anything, if there's pressure on, I tend to perform better. And I don't even know what it is. I just love sadistically love the challenge more, if that makes sense. I feel that the most satisfying work that I do is when I know a deal is really difficult to get it over the line or to get it negotiated, and I walk away on top, or having successfully done that. So I love those situations and thrive in those situations. But when you have pressure that keeps you up at night, that's a different story, because it's occupying you, because it's typically when there's unknown outcomes or scenarios,
I think that's the determination of pressure, though, isn't it? I think pressure is relative to the individual's bandwidth, isn't it? I think you feel pressure if it's coming home with you. You're at dinner with the missus and you're not really there. You're there, but you're not really there. That's your level. That's your threshold for pressure, isn't it? I suppose. What about you, Stu? How do you deal with
I just think you learn to. It's almost like a bit of an addiction, really. You sort of get yourself into a pressurized environment. You don't understand it. You take your foot off the gas, put your foot on the gas again. You learn how to deal with more and intense pressure. And I mean, the one thing I always think about pressure is that imagine being Winston Churchill at war, and you got the whole civil future, civilization on your shoulders, and he would go to bed and go, "I've done everything I can today. Enough's enough," and he would just switch out. And within 5 minutes, he's snoring his head off. He's had his warm bath and his cigar, and he's asleep.
Much, though.
Yeah, I know. Well, he basically it's in his book, and he just goes, "I've done everything I can today. I'm switching off," and that's what I sort of think about. It's like if I get to bed and I'm in a pressurized environment, I'm like, look, I'll pick this up in the morning, and it's an art. It is a skill to learn how to switch off, and it takes a long time to do it. But we do things that other people aren't willing to do, which makes us who we are. So it's just you've got to be comfortable with pressure.
I have a bit of a thesis on pressure, and I think it comes down to your worldview and how good of a worldview you have. If you have a good worldview and perspective, then you should quite easily be able to rationalize any situation and go, am I going to die? Am I going to live? Like, is the family going to be all right? Is the business really going to go under if this one thing doesn't happen? And then it's just compartmentalizing those things and just going, well, look, I wanted to build a business. I wanted to take on these risks. I want to have this kind of life. It's not going to come easy. And crying about it's not going to do anything to solve it. I think that's the big thing, isn't it?
Having cash flow and options does relief. It's like a pressure release valve. It just helps so much.
I think finance is the largest form of pressure. Yeah, I think if you look at every divorce, if you look at every probably business directorship argument where you've got two partners, if you look at actual JV partnerships, all of it pretty much within reason forms a pressure tank around finance. That's typically the biggest argument, and I completely agree with you. It's you got to look a little bit. Are we still alive? Are we going to be here next week? Can we still go outside and breathe in the fresh air?
But it can come in different forms, though. Like some people will take on pressure for reasons that really don't matter. So like I find that quite a lot of people won't even start a business because they're worried about what other people will think if they fail. And I think it's the same for those who are in business, who might have financial problems and they're having pressure on the financial problems, but then adding more pressure because they're worried about what people will think if they fail. And I think those parts, you can kind of strip those back and get rational about your decisions, which I think any good business owner has to do. And I think all four of us have figured that over time. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It doesn't matter. We're not going to die. It's just, can we find the cash flow? Can we do it sensibly, where we're not Ponzi scheming cash, which we've seen developers do in the space, and then that's just a road to disaster, isn't it?
This is quite controversial here because I've got 2 points. One, I agree with you and Ryan. Actually, your gift's on the wall there, the pale blue dot, and it's that one. Just basically, we're so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, and the things we're worried about are invented by mankind, like money, for example. But the biggest stress by far is those uncontrolled. Whenever I'm in an issue, I always look at the worst case scenario, and I try to play as many scenarios as I can. I'm kind of like mental chess with myself, and I'm trying to find the best case and the worst case. And experience tells me you end up somewhere in the middle, or just either side of the middle, really, never really the extreme. But I look at the extreme just to see, can I deal? Like, for example, we've got an issue going on now. And I do just that. And I looked at it and I thought, right, so the worst case scenario here is that it's going to cost 150 grand, basically. That's the worst case scenario. And it's a lot of money, like it is. But in the grand scheme of things, it's something that we can trade out, with a bit of time. That's the worst case scenario. So because of that, I'm going into, I'm tackling that issue with a lot of confidence and aggression and rigor, and I'm not really stressed. It's not keeping me up at night, except for like that. So I can deal with that really well. And that type of pressure, I'm just like Jack. I thrive really when it comes to that. When I know our position and I know we can cope with it, I'm really good with it. But when it comes to, when I look at the worst case scenario or middle case scenario, and the outcome is something I think we won't survive that, or we can't survive that, or this is actually one of those defining moments where it could close the doors type of thing. That's something I really struggle with, is if I don't have the answer for it, or
that's the ones that I say that keep me up. Where you've got unknowns. And you're trying to rationalize some options, but all the options are variables or theoretical until you have, my example at the moment, recapitalizing the portfolio. I don't know if that money's going to come in until it's come in, but I'm very confident there's 3 options there. But those 3 options could be no options, or there could be 6 options. So you're in this wade. You're treading water without seeing land.
Yeah. But be honest though, the keeping you up at night bit in those scenarios. So there's certain pressures that shouldn't keep you up at night, because you should be strong enough to deal with those kind of things in the day job. And I think we all kind of pass that buck, that you don't have to take certain things home with you. The ones that the fork in the road pressures, the things that could destroy the business, or the things that could be the defining moments. If you don't take them home with you, which is effectively is your brain going, find solution, isn't it? Like, it's just you're trying to work at it and prioritize that over everything else, and ultimately that's how you find the solution, isn't it? Because you take it home with you and you don't stop until you've found something that works, because you know that if you just leave that to the working hours and still have fun on your weekends, but the business is on the line, then you probably don't care enough about the business. So I think it's important that there's an element of pressure you do kind of take in and do everything you can to solve it.
It's also important to have a good peer group. So I've got 3 other friends. I've got you guys, obviously we've got guys from the group, and then I've got 3 other guys who are all equally in business that I would call upon all of them and say, look, I've got this situation. In this scenario, what would you do? And just take their opinion on board. I've come down our lift at our office. God, it must be 10 times when I've gone, fuck, this is a problem. This is a big, big problem. And, it's a 150 grand, 200 grand problem. This is a defining moment. And one of my cousins, who's also equally very successful, she's done really well, and she's like, look, nothing's going to change today. Have a few days and think on it. Like, you always feel like you have to react immediately, but actually give yourself a day, 2 days, ponder on it, ask other people in your peer group, and the right solution normally comes and rears its head. It's when you make impulse decisions and not give yourself options 1 to 5. You think there's 3 options, you take option 3, and then actually you could have thought a little bit harder and made a bit of a better decision.
Interestingly, do you ever, what I often struggle with my missus is I'm always pushing her to actually just go into work, because I see the stresses of her running a business before, and she still does, and me running a business. And, it's days where she's not feeling right, and I go, just call up and say you don't want to go in. It's not your business. It's their problem. And and I would never say that to a member of my staff, because obviously you don't want to be like, obviously if they feel, you know, like really unwell and they can't, you know, it would be unsensical for them to come in, or they've got family issues. I always say family first over business, but I would never, you know, implore that. And I just like the fact that with my partner, I'll just say, no, it's not your business. You don't have to stress. You don't have to fill that gym every day. You don't have to turn up every day. You are an employee, and that is not your problem. And like release that from your, because you know she gets worked up and feels that she's got those responsibilities.
What would we say then to those out there, for our listeners, our lovely listeners, because this isn't unique to property development. This is any business is going to have cash flow issues, those keeping you up at night moments. And to be honest, if you don't have those moments, you're not doing it right and you're not scaling fast enough. So you're going to have these problems. What is in your guys' head? What's the first port of call? You've a new problem's hit the desk today, and you've gone, right, cash flow issue, going to need some capital here, going to have to find a way to pay it, to raise some money, pay it off. Let's just look like 101, starting with Stu and working around. What's the thought process when these problems come up?
My thought process before the problems come up is to scale, but scale in a controlled way. Don't go full balls to the wall and just fucking go for it. And then you're going to have problems where you're out your depth. Just learn to take small risks and then deal with the solutions in front of you, and then take slightly bigger risks. Yeah. And just don't keep throwing more shit at the wall, hoping some more will stick. I mean, it's an art. It totally is an art. And if you don't play the game right, you'll get burnt, basically. And I think that you just need to just take your time, grow in a business, really build the foundation before you start building on it. Don't just start throwing bricks up on sand and it all fall apart.
What about when things happen though? You know, like you might have some kind of planning issue or some construction issue on site, or contractor goes bust. So things that, you know, weren't necessarily even to do with scaling, but now you've got money to find, now you've got deadlines to hit. What's your thought process, Stu?
Well, all of those. So if the planning's failed, go for something a bit more straightforward that you know is not going to fail before you just go straight into do a 32 unit scheme. Go and do a household application and flip a few houses. If you've got a builder that's going bust, that use a smaller builder that you can lean on, that you know they haven't got huge cash flow obligations that are going to put them in a position to go bust. I mean, there's always a risk there. Just make the decisions ahead of those problems. You don't know what you don't know, and I totally get that, but don't go out too deep and then have all these problems happen at once, because it'll ruin you.
See, I agree. I understand what you're saying with the preemption, but let's say you've done all the preemption you can, you know, but you just get to a position where, you know, market's fucked, or you can't refinance at the rate you want to. You need to inject more capital, but you don't have the reserves. What's your thought process to going, okay, I need to fill this hole, I need to solve this problem? What's the immediate things that run through your head?
Immediately, I would be leaning on my peer group or a mentee or someone I've worked with to go, look, this is the situation, and I'd run it past them and just run the scenario through with them before you do it.
I think you mean mentor, not mentee.
Mentor, yeah. I'll find a mentor, yeah. Don't follow someone who doesn't know what they're doing. That would be a right pain. That'd be worse than following someone who has
what should I do in this situation? Well, I'm paying you to tell me, Stuart. All right, okay, wrong person.
Well, that's funny. I thought I was paying you. Follow someone who knows what they're doing, basically, and don't grow too quick. That's what I would say.
Okay, Jack, how do you deal with these problems? You know,
a very, very wise man once told me. Shout out to Ronan. He said, in any problem, you typically need to negotiate more time and more money, and that's pretty much the solution for anything. And, you know, let's say you've got a contract to go bust, you need to negotiate more time from your investor and from your bank. You might need to negotiate more money from your investor and your bank, or another project, or your own capital cost. So I think they're two leading poignant points. But I mean, the problem you'll always have, being in our shoes, is we've talked about creating a buffer, right? But our problem is we spend our buffer. We go, well, that looks like a good deal over there. Let's use this cash reserve. If we only need it for 2 weeks, we can buy that and we can make a really good return on it, and then put the money back in. And then a year later, that money's still in other things that you've borrowed and put it into various items. So I believe that there's 3 solutions to any problem, and it's all about making them as thorough and as well thought through and as socialized as possible. So what I mean by socialized is get your 3 solutions, then bounce them off, like Stuart said, a mentor. We had a difficult meeting last week, and the first thing I did was sent it straight to our non-exec advisor. I said, this is what happened. And immediately he sort of sent me a point of contact to ring, and he was helping, and he's on board. You know, he's part of the process of resolving that significant problem. I also believe that as a director CEO, this is kind of like when a big problem hits you in the face, that's what you're getting paid for. If you can't handle that, who can? Because if you're the person in the business that should be resolving that situation. I would also say be really honest with the peer group. You don't want to pull back half the curtain and not show all of the gremlins. The difficult conversations in business drive the best results. And you really do need to be completely bar honest with everyone and be vulnerable, because sometimes it's difficult from an ego perspective to say this has happened, we're under pressure, and we don't know what to do. And it's fundamentally, the more vulnerable you can be, the more likely people are going to be able to help you with the real solution. Because what you will find if you're not completely transparent is you'll get solutions that actually don't provide a result of the problem because they don't see the bigger picture. And act fast, work double time, be creative. A lot of it's to do with like relationships and negotiate. For an example, we had a big bill in one of our businesses, and fundamentally we didn't have the cash in there from a drawdown yet. And my employee said, "I'm being chased for this, but we haven't got the funds." But if I called the owner of that independent business and said, "Look, this is where we're at. This is when we've got a date of funds coming in. We'll send you this now. We'll finish up the rest later." He said, "Yeah, no problem." And that phone call is kind of like where you're getting paid to buy the time and buy the capital, rather than your employee just thinking invoice lands in front of them and they pay it and that's it. And if there's no money in the bank account, they sort of break. So yeah, pick up the phone.
No, nice, mate. Nice. D, how do you solve it, mate?
Some really good stuff. I love this topic because this is the dance we've been dancing for the past couple of years. And anybody who scales a business it's very rare that you manage to scale a business to a decent height without going through these stages. So one there's a lot there, but one good thing, Murphy's laws, right? And I've just Googled it so I can read them out just very quickly. There's 5 on this one I just found. In any field of endeavor, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Left to themselves, things always go from bad to worse. If there is a possibility of several things going wrong, the one that will go wrong is the one that will cause the most damage. Nature always sides with the hidden flaw, and if everything seems to be going well, you have obviously overlooked something. And there's a book called Only the Paranoid Survive, and basically emphasizes that last point. If everything seems to be going well, you've obviously overlooked something. And that means that you've kind of always got to be paranoid in business, especially in your scaling, because anything can break at any time. And like, for example, when you start operating on a decent scale, so if you take us, for example, we're still classed as small in the world of business, but we turn over north of 2 million a month now. And if you look at our cash flow, you have all the money coming in from various different contracts, and you have all the money going out. And if you just like say, worst case scenario, the clients don't pay you for a month, you zero all that out, you're like, the business can't survive that, basically. So that is too extreme, because that then becomes just in the lower probability is that's a 0.01% chance that will probably happen. So you got to be a bit realistic with it. Otherwise nothing would work and you wouldn't do anything. But I would say, for my advice to people, I'm going to split it down into 3 stages. Pre-event, we're talking about the event now. Look, give you a question, right, about an issue coming up. So things you can do preemptively, things you can do during, and then post. I believe that, and we've talked about it before, anybody in business should be building up their knowledge pot and their network pot, basically. And in business, understanding how business works is really important. But understanding finance in business is critical. How you can raise money, the different types of money you can raise, where you can raise it from, what it means, understand, just all of that is so vital. And then your network, because you may need to leverage them on a later date. When you're then scaling your business, if you've taken some of those points from a business point of view and from your learnings, and you've tried to scale your business, as Stuart said, sensibly, i.e. you're scaling a business that has a positive working capital cycle. You know how much capital you need before you go and commit to a project, and you get that money in advance first. And you do like X, Y, and Z. You're always trying to stay that step ahead, being a bit paranoid in case. But inevitably something's going to go wrong anyway, because you just don't know yet. And then when it does go wrong, what I do is the very first thing I look at is I do 2 things. I find out the legal position. It's the first thing I do. Whatever issue comes up, if somebody's, if we're in a dispute with somebody or something's kicking off, I want to understand the legal position straight away. And I want to know, and I'll come to a decision. Do I think that and I try to be very objective about it. Are we in a strong legal position, or are they in a strong legal position? And whichever the outcome is dictates the next move. If they're in a strong legal position, I'll focus just on negotiating, but know that I need to settle or whatever the issue is. If we're in a strong legal position, I'll do whatever I need to do, fight basically. Then the second thing I look at is what's the worst case scenario? And does that scenario kill us or not? Can we afford that worst case scenario? So if an issue comes up, and I've mentioned it before, for our size of our business, we're dealing with an issue now, and it's 150 grand worst case scenario. I don't want to pay 150,000, and I hope it doesn't materialize to that, but that's the worst case. And I know that we will be able to afford that if that comes off, unfortunately, that way. So I basically go into, like we said, negotiation mode, negotiating for time and money and doing everything I can to fight it. But then if the worst case scenario is something that we cannot survive and it's a real risk, I will clear my entire decks and I will get as many people as I can involved, and I'll focus my entire effort on just fighting and fighting and fighting, not necessarily to resolve the position, but to get it back into the zone of affordability for the business. Really, it's going to still be an issue, and that's all I'll focus on. And it's very, very stressful. Those ones are. And anyway, and then the third stage is post. Once you've managed to get out of the situation or you've got a resolution, it's then looking at what happened, what went wrong, why did it go wrong, and then what can we do again? Like we've come through a recent issue, and I've mentioned it to you guys. I've changed some fundamental principles in the business of how we scale, our capital deployment strategy, our reserve policy, all that sort of stuff, to try to give ourselves a chance going forward that same issue, Murphy's Law, won't come back again. Because if we don't learn from it, it will come back again. And you do need a bit of luck on your side sometimes if to get out of those issues that you weren't prepared for.
Just on that point, D, what we do at the Loft business is obviously we're ISO 9001 registered, so we've got a process and a management system that we can adhere to and work to. So when we do have an issue like that, that's going to cost us money because we've fixed priced our contract with the customer. When we were growing and scaling, you need people to take charge and use their initiative and want to grow and make a decision without being fearful of making the wrong decision. But when those decisions happen and mistakes are made or things cost money, we simply just add it to our non-conformance. And then every 3 months, it's less now because we're making less mistakes, but we'd go out as a team with a no blame culture and go, look, these are the problems. We've got 5-6 problems that have happened this quarter. This is the situation. This is how much it cost us. And then as a team, work out what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's when you update old forms, or you take better photos at the survey, or you add some pre-start information to make everyone aware that these are things could happen and that who's responsible. And it takes a long time and a lot of discipline. But if you do that, you are going to eliminate it happening again. And there's nothing worse in business than having the same mistake happen 2-3 times, especially if it's costly and you're like, fucking hell, is the team not learning? But you need to do these things in order to scale. And then you build a new process. And then when new staff members, new hires start, they're going to have a much better run in than just make the same mistakes again. I mean, it's painful when it happens.
I always say in our team meetings and reviews, it's always easier to slow someone down than speed them up.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. Have conviction and actually, I say to them, make a mistake. I want you to be making mistakes.
And just on the thing about scaling up, I think it's equally as important to know how to scale down as well. By knowing your balance sheet, by knowing what makes your business run. As and when the business environment changes and the money cycle and people tighten, you need to be able to pull back and pull forward just as quick. Because if you don't, and you're just naive and you just keep trying to grow into a business that's not at the right time to grow, you'll just burn out of cash. So yeah, it's equally as important to learn how to scale down and scale up, and just have all the levers around you to best drive your business forward. Really.
I'll add one more piece there because there's some really good nuggets there. This should be super valuable for people. And frustratingly, I think I can guess that for some listeners who've not experienced this stuff yet, they may not fully appreciate what we're talking about here. But just trust me, when you get into that position of a cash flow issue and you've got payroll and you've got all these other responsibilities, come back and listen to episode 45 of this podcast, because then you will completely sympathize with what it's like when you're in these scenarios.